Hey guys, let's add some Playmates to the shelf. Okay, what's going on, guys? When I was growing up, I had one specific toy that I absolutely loved that nobody else did. Playmates. The action figures, Star Trek action figures from Playmates were astonishing. They were really, really good. The only thing that I would call out about these old figures were the legs. That was it. That was the only part that I didn't like. I was okay with the way the arms moved. I was okay with the faces. The faces are a huge thing for me. See, faces are something that gets messed up very easily, and I have very big problems with. In fact, one of the things that I'm having trouble with the new Power Ranger line, and I've been asked about this a couple of times, is what are you getting from the Lightning Collection? What are you getting from the Lightning Collection? In all honesty, there's one feature of the Lightning Collection that I don't like. It bothers me. It makes me not like it. And it's a simple thing, but it's a big deal to me. Faces. The faces look weird. They look bad. Like, it doesn't look like Jason. It looks like a weird kind of overweight. Like, his face just seems wrong to me. And it's not just him. It's Zach. Zach doesn't quite look like Zach. And Billy doesn't quite look like Billy. And Kimberly doesn't quite look like Kimberly. And it's something, I don't know if it's just the way I'm perceiving it or what, but there's a lot of people that really like this new Lightning line, and I don't. But I loved this line of figures. Absolutely loved it. We are going to add Riker to the shelf. This is like a battle damage Riker. He was from the first season of Guys that came out. We are going to add Deanna Troi to that line today. We're going to add her to the shelf today. We are going to add Worf to the shelf. Whoa, man, fix your arm. Are you kidding me here? There's a whole mess of characters that are going up on this shelf. And we'll go over each one. But how about I just do a quick list of the figures that are going up, and then I go into a bit of a story, because you know these are going up on the shelf. So let's get to the part where I talk about something interesting and maybe call out something about the toys, which I did. I told you what I don't like. So let's do that, shall we? So here is a whole handful of figures that need to go up on that shelf today. It is a whole messed up freaking handful, hard to hold because they're figures. Let's talk about this. First off, this Picard, okay? We got a Picard that's going up there, but we got two Picards that go up there, because alongside this Picard, we are also going to add this Picard. This is the Picard from the first release that I remember anyway, and I like this one. I like that jacket. I like the way that he looks a little bit more than I like the way that this one looks. This is the unused uniform, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember actually getting this uniform. If I'm not mistaken, this was a concept uniform that did not get used. That still would have been a pretty decent uniform if you want my actual opinion. I think this would have stood out quite nicely, except for maybe the feature on the arms. But I digress so that we can move through this list. We're going to add a Geordie to the shelf because I need a Geordie on the shelf. In fact, I would like to have a different Geordie, but this one fills the quota of at least having one on the shelf for right now. We are also going to add a Beverly Crusher to the shelf. Let's go ahead and turn around and just put these here. We're going to add a Beverly Crusher to the shelf. So here she is. That's Beverly Crusher. Not bad. This one is pretty solid. It's the one, whereas the overcoat, I'm fine with that. It did cause a bit of a problem for her, though, in terms of the action figures. She can't, like, sit down. And that is a problem that basically comes down to not just the legs, but the fact that the coat was not an actual coat when they did this with Playmates. Aside from that, we are also going to add a Cisco to the shelf, and Cisco deserves to be on my shelf. In fact, he's going to be up there twice because I already added the other ones, if you remember right. And during the time when I tell my little story about this, you'll get to see those. We are also going to add Janeway to the shelf. This would be Nick's favorite captain, and there's nothing wrong with having a favorite captain. She's a solid character, even if I, more than likely, would not follow this person. There are some things, some decisions that she makes in the series that she's in that have profoundly bothered me to this day, and while I'm okay with her as a character and I think her show was decent, she may very well be my least favorite captain. We're going to put Old Man Riker on there. This is Old Man Admiral Riker. This is pretty cool, so I'm glad that I have him. And we're also going to put up the Battle Damaged Riker onto the same shelf. So they're going to stand together. We're going to put Worf on that shelf. I just dropped him. Here's Worf. He's going to go up on the shelf. There is a red costume of this Worf as well, and I think that's cool that they have first season. Like, if it existed, man, there was a figure of these. It is outrageous how far Playmates really dipped in. Here's the closest thing to a uniform that she got for a very long time, Troy. It was an okay costume, but I tend to like Troy in uniform. Lastly, one of my favorites of this entire group goes on the shelf, this Data. I really like this Data. This was one of the first Star Trek toys I ever got in my entire life, this Data. And I remember specifically, one of the things that I really liked about it was that he opens up. He opens up on his back to show some circuitry, and he opens up on his arm to show some circuitry. That is a small little gimmick. It is a small little gimmick, but as a child that absolutely loved Data, that found him to be the most interesting thing on the show, that was absolutely my favorite character by far. There wasn't even there wasn't even anything that compared. He was my favorite character for their entire run when I was growing up, and still actually might be. Not that I don't like other characters almost just as much now, and it's really hard for me to pick a favorite from that crew, in all honesty, but he might edge it out. He still might be my favorite. He was unbelievable. The fact that his back opened up and everything added so much to my imagination when I was growing up. But let's go ahead and get a couple shots of these guys on the shelf. I'm going to rearrange this top area a little bit so we can get them up there with all the other Star Trek guys. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something about disappointment when it came to these Star Trek figures. So as a side note, putting things on the shelf, covering our Star Trek section, let's also put in this phaser, because this is a pretty solid piece. This is the phaser from the Wrath of Khan. Pretty solid piece in general. It actually comes apart, which I thought was cool. So you have both types. You have the gun and the handheld, and that's pretty cool. Let's also add this little bitty Micro Machines Enterprise D. This was a solid little piece when I was growing up, in all honesty. It's not focusing. There it is. This was pretty cool. I remember it was one of the first little ships that I ever actually owned. Let's also add, for the sake of, I have this little toy. This came on a cake. It was on a birthday cake specifically, a Star Trek birthday cake. I can't remember how old I was or exactly how far back it was when I got it, but it still works. You turn it on, well, okay, if it had batteries, it would still work. But I know that it still works. I have turned it on a couple of times before, and these two little areas right there light up. It just made me a liar here to try to tell you. You've seen this if you've been with the show long enough. That's my communicator, and it is a solid piece. Stop doing that. It is a very solid piece. It looks absolutely wonderful, and it's going to look good up there sitting on the shelf. Nice communicator. And then a Christmas ornament will also go in the background of all the figures. That's pretty solid. It's just a nice little Christmas ornament of them using the transporter, and I believe that it used to actually light up and do a little thing, but I haven't put batteries in this thing for a very long time, nor do I necessarily intend to, especially since it's going on the shelf, because it would just rot. and then I would get battery acid and things like that, so that's not a thing. So I'm going to set that up and I'm going to tell a little story. So now, like most of these episodes actually do, now that we've got them up on the shelf, you can see them behind me, they got a spot and everything. Let's talk about a little bit of story time, something significant that makes these important and interesting in my life, and that's the reason that they go up on the shelf, because after all, I've said it before, I've said it again and again and again and again and again, if it doesn't have a purpose in my own personal fandom with ReploidBill, it doesn't go up there. Why do these things earn a place? Why specifically do these Playmate toys over all other Star Trek toys get bought and put on the shelf constantly? And by the way, that's not all of them that's going up there. There's going to be another episode that talks about a toy store that I visited that's going to be pretty cool. It very well might be the next episode, and that is going to add even more of those guys to the shelf. But look, here's what's going on, guys. When I was growing up, I had neighbors and friends, and we played G.I. Joes, and we played Dragon Ball Z, and we played like basic war with like little Micro Machine war guys, and we had like a couple of the aircraft carriers and stuff like that, and we used to play with those. And like, I had a friend that loved Star Wars, so we had some Star Wars toys, and we would play Star Wars, and Micro Machine Star Wars were literally the biggest thing. We used to play the shit out of some Micro Machine Star Wars. But when it came to Star Trek, it was just me. It was just me. I was so alone in this fandom when I was a kid, and there was no internet for me. There was no release for me like that. Even in '95 when I got a computer, the internet was just so basic and I didn't really understand it, and like trying to get into it was rough. And then in '98 it wasn't necessarily that much better. I kind of got into like some chat rooms and things like that, but there was no real way for me to express how much I loved Star Trek and these things. There were some cool websites and whatnot that I would visit, but like, I didn't understand how big it was and why it necessarily affected me the way that it did. And I've talked about this many times. Star Trek is very, very important to me. Well, when I was growing up, I had all these figures and more. I had the original Playmates release of the original crew that came in the cardboard bridge. I remember I kept that cardboard bridge so I could do my own original series episodes. I remember how I lost a couple of those guys. Is that one of my friends, he didn't give a shit about Star Trek. He thought they were stupid toys, and one night in the basement when we were hanging out, we were doing some stupid shit. For whatever reason, he decided to start melting figures with a lighter, and it was like, ha ha ha, this is funny because we're kids and we're stupid. And while he was doing it, he grabbed a hold of Spock, and he started doing that. And I remember back then, I was ashamed enough, or like, I don't know, peer pressured enough or whatever to want to be cool, so toys were done for me anyway, and haha, that is kind of funny. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all. I lost something that I honestly, truly cared about more than I realized I cared about it, and it's a toy, okay? No matter what we put down on this, no matter what personal emotions we put into it, the fact is, he burned a toy, haha. He burned like 4 or 5 Star Trek figures. I lost a couple of figures that day, and then I lost them through just growing up and selling them and things like that. But I'll never forget how much that affected me, because it made me remember something. When I was growing up, we played a lot of different things. We had turtle action figures and everything like that, and we used to always play those. Nobody liked Star Trek but me. But me. I had another friend that was okay with the Next Generation, but that was it. In terms of me growing up and playing with action figures and toys and things like that, there was nobody else that played. I remember it was just my own personal thing that at night, or if I made a trip down to my grandma's, so that puts me down in Alabama or Missouri or wherever that it happened to be at the time. If I went down there, it was just going to be me alone, and I'd take all my Star Trek figures with me, and Like, I tell my own stories, and I was the only one that played with these figures. I was the only one that cared. I had a transporter room, I had the engine room, I had a shuttlecraft, I had the original Enterprise in a model form, I had the Next Generation Enterprise D in the actual toy, I had a Bird of Prey Klingon version, I had a Bird of Prey Romulan version. Like, I had a lot of cool playmates. I had all kinds of characters. I had the dude Darmok and Jarad Tanagra. I had that dude. And I had the weird thing where Geordi turns into the weird alien with all the blue veins. And just all kinds of characters. I had Lore. I had Data. A ridiculous amount of figures. But during the time that I had these figures, I was the only one that ever gave them any attention whatsoever. It was just me. Nobody else cared. Later in life, after I'd gotten rid of them all, and I'd gotten a whole new friend base, basically, most of my friends are new compared to who I was hanging out with back then when I'm telling this story, I started rebuying these Playmate figures because I reached a point of maturity where I really didn't give a fuck anymore. They were important to me. I gave a shit. It's my money, so I did what I wanted to do with it. And part of what I wanted to do was reacquire those things that I had lost that meant something personally to me, even more so than the other toys, because the other toys had staying power. The Star Wars had staying power, the Turtles had staying power, the Joes had staying power. These were all things that I did with my friends, but Star Trek, all those toys, was just me. Nobody else messed with them. Ever. It's kind of crazy when I look back on it and I realize how that really did work out, that nobody ever touched these things but me. And now that I'm all grown up and I had a chance, I've been acquiring these things where I come across them. And there are still some things I would want. I still want to get my hands on one of the play sets, the original Bridge play sets. There's not an actual play set, mind you. It's just a cardboard box, essentially. It's the packaging. And it's kind of a bridge, and it comes with like a cardboard captain's chair, but I want the original crew figures. I would love to put the original crew figures up here, and I never come across them, ever. I'm sure that if I looked pretty hard, I could find them, but I've never come across them just in the wild. I'm going to have to go online to buy them. And that's part of what's cool about this new shop that I found that we're going to talk about later. Warp Drive Toys has a lot of these things, and I was able to pick up some figures that I never expected to run across. I got new Star Wars guys, I got new Star Trek guys, and I got even a new off-the-wall figure that I wasn't expecting to run into that kind of excites me for some future figures down the road. But we have now added the Star Trek Playmates back to the shelf, so I'm going to get out of here.
I have spoken. Take what you will from it.